All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another informative episode of Bright Brains. Today we have as a guest Rod Infinity,
Sir,
author of the new hit book Airball. Almost 100% of all basketball players won't make it to the NBA. Please join me in welcoming Rod to the podcast. Welcome to the show,
hey,
Rod.
appreciate it, Isaac.
Tell
Thanks for letting me come on today. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Hey, I'm glad you're here, man. I'm really excited to talk about this book. It was really eye-opening. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then you can also tell us about your book.
Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I have an athletic background. I played basketball in high school. I actually played a little bit of college ball, not like for no big Division One, but I played for a JUCO, which is a junior college. I did have an offer to a school called Goshen College, which is in Indiana, which is a NAIA school. For any hoop fans out there, probably know about that. If you're not into college hoops, you probably don't know much about that. But I ultimately turned that down. Went to Kent State University, got my bachelor's degree from there, and yeah, that's just kind of like a little bit of my background as far as like when it comes to basketball. I actually did play with the University of Cincinnati Bearcats on their summer league team in the Devereaux League back in the day. I also tried out for I went to back when it was called the NBA D League. It's now called the G League, but I went to one of their national tryouts and actually received the call back from the Idaho Stampede, which is now the Salt Lake City Stars. And I actually practiced a few days with the Arizona Scorpions, which is a defunct team now. They don't exist anymore, but they're in the ABA, which is a professional
Awesome.
team.
All right, man. So yeah, you've had a long career playing basketball at the collegiate level and at the semi-pro level. So that's awesome. So you looks like been on you've actually tried to make it to the NBA. Is that what inspired you to write this book?
Dream that many young men, not only in the United States but across the world, have of trying to play in the NBA one day. But what actually inspired me to write the book is kind of an interesting story. I talk about it in the preface of the book, but I'll definitely give a little scoop here to all your listeners here on Bright Brains. So it was in 2017. I was working just this little side job, just a little gig, and like literally I didn't know this woman, never spoke to her. She just walks up to me, looks me up and down, and just like with disgust on her face, and she's just like, "Why aren't you in the NBA?" And she wasn't saying it jokingly. She like literally meant it. And like I kind of like, people, I'm 6'6". I've heard this many times, not in this tone before, but I just kind of like looked at her and I was just like, "Well, ma'am, I hate to burst your bubble, but almost everybody is not gonna make the NBA. It doesn't matter how tall you are. The odds are like so far against you, like nobody hardly makes it." And then literally, this was her remark. She said, "Well, we must have all been lied to then." And like that moment, I know, right? Like,
I mean, what she think? Just everybody that's like 6'5" and above, they just as soon, as soon as you hit 6'5", some guy just drops out of the sky and says, "Hey, come play for the Lakers or come play for the Miami Heat."
Trust me, I wish it was that easy. I wish I was just making millions of dollars playing basketball just because I'm 6'6". I really wish it was that easy. But to finish up your question there, like when she said that, like most people who play basketball are aware that the odds are very low. But like even myself, back when basketball was life, and like literally every day I was at the gym. Even when I wasn't at practice, I would go to the gym after practice on the weekend, go to practice. Like I never knew the exact odds. Like, everybody just thinks like, well, especially like in the junior college realm, a lot of people think like, well, as long as I get to a Division I school, I have a chance of making it. But I actually looked for a book that like showed this information and I couldn't find anything. And I thought to myself at the time, like, wow, this might be a good idea for a book one day. Maybe I could like write a book about this. Once again, this is 2017. Fast forward 2 years later, I actually start brainstorming and like kind of doing the research, and the research, led to me, starting to write the outline of the book. And then, I planned on taking 2 years to write the book. but it ended up taking me closer to 4 years to finish. But in July of this year, I'm definitely happy to say the book is out and available now.
All right. So it took 4 years to write the book. And the book, the title says almost 100% of basketball players won't make it
Mhm.
to the NBA. So tell
Mhm.
us, how did you do that research and how did you come to that conclusion?
So for this research, literally for like the first year, I was just gathering data. So I didn't like literally for the first full year I was working on this. I went through every single NBA draft, going back to the first draft, which was held in 1947 or it might be 46. But I went back to the very first NBA draft all the way up to 2019. So the book covers from when the first year of the NBA all the way through before we go into the 2020s. Um, so I literally went through just to kind of save the details here. I had like several massive like spreadsheets, like Excel spreadsheets, to where essentially I just created a, like for each college division, I had a column and a row. For each basketball player, I had their name, I had what school they went to, I had how long their career was. And I essentially just compile all of this data line by line and just put it together. Like I had to, I would take this set of data to get to this data. Then when I got that data, I would take that data, compile it to get this next fact. So like it was literally like countless, like I probably spent like at least 1,000 hours just on gathering data and sorting through it alone before I even put, I guess you can't say pen to paper anymore. I guess there's some writers out there that still write pen and paper, but until I started actually like writing the book, before I even wrote one word, all that time was spent just on gathering the data.
All right, then. And so with this data, you came up with a new concept that you call the five courts hierarchy. Can you explain? Yeah, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so the five course hierarchy, it's a easy to understand, very simple ranking and comparison system that I invented. So essentially, imagine when the coach calls a timeout, the little the board that they hold that it has the basketball court on it. It looks like it's an overview of the basketball court. So it's essentially five of those courts. So it's court number one, court number two, court number three, court number four, and court number five. Court number 1 through 4 all of the NCAA Division One teams, and they're ranked from top to bottom for the most NBA players they produced throughout history, both drafted and undrafted combined. So, court number one at number one spot, for instance, is the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. They produced the most NBA players of any conference in any college basketball division since the beginning of history for the NBA, so on and so forth. And then court five is different. So court number five is any entity that's not associated with NCAA Division One that has produced an NBA player. So like international, NCAA Division Two, NCAA Division Three, NAIA, NJCAA, high school, and then a other category for anybody who's made it who doesn't fit any of those buckets.
All right. Yeah, it was really interesting how you broke it down. Um, most of the players who go to the NBA came from that first court. And but then as court two, court three, court four, and five, the chances go down considerably. So my
Yes.
question is this, like let's say there's a person, like a young kid, who is dreaming of going to the NBA, right? And they see this book and they're like, man, like almost 100% of people don't make it to the NBA. Like, what would you tell that young man? What advice would you give him?
So first and foremost, I would just tell them, hey, these are the facts. I mean, I'm not making these numbers up. This is literally like this is the truth. This is what I wish I would have known back when I was 17 years old. I would essentially tell them, hey, never give up on your dreams. Obviously, people are in the NBA every single year. There's more people that get drafted and make it to the NBA. There's people that are undrafted that make it to the NBA. But you got to have a plan B. And I think that that's something that a lot of people just really don't, they talk about it, but even when I was playing junior college basketball, like half the team literally was talking like they thought they could make the NBA still one day, myself included. I thought like, oh, if I just make it to any Division One team, that and then I go there and I do good, that I would have a quote unquote good chance of making it to the NBA. And I actually came across an article while I was writing the book, and it had basically said that like 75% of Division One men's basketball players feel that they have a quote unquote chance of making it into the NBA. When in
Wow.
reality, it's only like 3.8% of Division One players get drafted to the NBA. So there's this like gigantic gap perceived perceived chances and just the straight up facts. So getting back to what you were saying, if I was talking to a young man, I would say, depending on how old they are, if they're 17 years old and they haven't even got an offer to college for a basketball team, I would probably say, hey, look, chase your dreams, but you're probably not going to make it. Maybe you'll be able to make it overseas somewhere if you get lucky and you really bust your ass and you work your way up. But your chances of just making it to the NBA they're basically like nil at that point. If the country doesn't know, especially in this day and age with the internet and with social media, if by the time you're like a freshman and sophomore in high school, if you don't have some type of viral clip and the basketball community at large kind of knows who you are a little bit, you're already like super behind the eight ball, like right out the gate.
Yeah, yeah. Like people like LeBron James,
Mhm.
he probably had the most followed high school career out of any NBA player. I remember like his high school games would get like national and international coverage. So you knew LeBron
Yeah.
James was going to be going to the NBA. But,
Mhm.
I see a lot of young men and unfortunately a lot of young black men who kind of put
Mhm.
all their eggs into the basketball basket. That was a nice little pun there.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. But why do you think that is? Why do you think so many young black men, put all
Mhm.
their efforts into basketball or just sports in general?
A lot of it has to do with, I don't want to get too, I'll just kind of keep it real on here. I don't want to go too political with this, but you got to think about it. Sports was one of the first things, we know the history of our country, and, unfortunately, Black Americans at one time was severely discriminated against in a lot of different fields um, in this country. But, athletics was one of the first opportunities we had, um, along with like, serving in the military and things of that nature. But I think a lot of it goes back to that. Also, especially before the days of social media and internet, what would you see all the movies that had like a lot of the movies and media, like a lot of the positive portrayals is always like, especially young black men or just young men in general, always like the superstar athlete, to save the family. But what I'm saying, you can make it, through this, especially back when players were going from high school to the NBA. That was like the dream. It was like, oh, don't even go to college, just 18 years old right out of high school and just go to the NBA and make all these millions of dollars and be a superstar. It's a lot of sensationalism, and a lot of it comes from the media, especially once again before the social media age where we see people doing other things and making a living. I think a lot of it stems from that.
All right. So when you were doing the research for this book, what are some key statistics or insights that really stood out to you?
The first one that jumps to mind is that I'll ask you this first. I'm not sure if you're like super familiar with basketball conferences, but have you ever heard of Division Two? Do you know what Division Two is?
Yeah, Division two are like schools that aren't as large as Division one schools, correct? Or is there
That's
more?
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. And they still have basketball teams and a lot of good basketball players. When do you think the last player from Division Two was drafted into the NBA?
I'm gonna assume it's not as much as Division one, but I'm gonna say it had to be a couple, like within the last 5 or so years or so, right?
The incorrect. And the last player from Division Two that got drafted to the NBA's name is Robert Whaley, and he got drafted in 2005. He's
Oh
the
wow.
last Division Two player. And here's the kicker. He played for a Division One team. He played for. I know you're from Cincinnati, like I am. He played for
Yeah.
University of Cincinnati before he transferred to the Division Two school. So he
Huh.
actually had ties to Division One before he got drafted. But that's the last Division Two player that actually got drafted into the NBA. So we're talking almost 2 decades ago. And guess how long his career was?
Like 1 year.
I believe he played for 1 year. I believe it was either 1 or 2 years, but I believe 1 year. Yes.
Yeah. That's
So
wild, man.
yeah. So literally, if you don't play Division One, you're basically toast. You're not making the NBA. Plain and simple.
Gotcha. Man.
Every decade it might be one or two players from Division Two or three that goes undrafted. You're not going to be drafted. You might go like undrafted. It might be one or two players a decade from Division Two that goes undrafted, and Division Three it's even less. I have there's a section towards the end of the book. I believe it's in chapter 12 that shows like the last five players from like these smaller divisions and conferences, the last people who got like drafted. And I believe for like junior college, the fifth most recent like undrafted players from like 1982 or something.
Oh wow.
Yes,
That's
it's
crazy.
that long. Yeah,
That's
I know
crazy.
it. And people don't realize that, once again, I was a junior college ball player, and I literally thought I had a quote unquote chance to make it as long as I got to Division One.
Yeah. What was really interesting that stood out to me was how many international players there were.
Mm.
I could be wrong, but I think there were more international players in the NBA than there are Division two players in the NBA.
It's
Yeah,
not even close. It's not even
yeah.
close. One in five NBA players today are foreign born.
Oh, really? One in five?
One in five. Yeah. So like a lot of them come over here and play for like for instance Joel Embiid. He played for Kansas, but he was born. Who's also a former NBA MVP. He was born in Cameroon, so he's an
Mhm.
international player. But yeah, one in five NBA players today born outside of U.S. soil.
That's wild. And you said you think that it's going to grow larger, right, over time.
Actually, on this one, so this one's kind of tough. I actually said that towards the end of my book, I talk about how it's kind of like the international kind of is at a crossroads. So, interesting thing is that like a lot of international players that was so during the 2000s, that's when we witnessed like the boom of the international player. Like 89 players throughout the 2000s decade were drafted that came from an international background. And like, I believe like the 3 decades leading up to that, like the 1970s maybe had like one international player that played that was drafted. Like the 80s had like maybe two or three. The 90s had like maybe four or five. And then boom, all of a sudden 2000 come, it was 89. But what I found out in my data was that there was a lot more players that was drafted. Now, those were players that actually played. There were 89 players that were international that played at least 1 year, but like it was close to 40% of international players drafted actually never played in the NBA. And then during the 2010s, it was like, I think like 68 or 69 international players played, but like more than half of them that were drafted actually never played. So I'm, it's only 2 rounds in the NBA draft now, but I'm kind of torn on this one because a lot like I believe the last 5 years the MVPs of the NBA have been foreign born. So like it was Joel Embiid, Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jokic won it I believe 2 years. So like yeah, so all these international players are doing great. Like guys like Luka, who's the upcoming star, but a lot of players that are drafted internationally don't come over and actually play. So I don't know if teams are gonna be like, if they were to know this, I don't know if they would just like go the more casual route and stick with Division One players. It's kind of tough on that. It's kind of tough to answer where it's going to be in the future. But right now,
Yeah.
international is definitely a big influence on the game, even down to the gameplay style. Like a lot of styles that are used in the European leagues overseas is starting to make its way over into the NBA with like the positionless players. The Euro step got really big about a decade ago. So the European game, especially, has had a major influence on the NBA of today.
So it used to be that you didn't even have to go to college to play in the NBA. I mean, you used to be able to just
Mhm.
go right out of high school, but then they came
That's
up with a
correct.
rule. they came up with a rule that said you had to have be out of high school for at least 1 year before going to the NBA.
That's correct. Yes, it was part of the NBA collective bargaining agreement for I believe it was right around I want to say like 2005 or 2006. But essentially that creates a rule where you have to be at least 19 years old. You have to be at least 1 year removed from your graduation to be eligible for the NBA draft. So I don't know the exact ins and outs as far as like why the NBA decided to get rid of that or not let players come straight from high school. I know there's been a lot of talk recently about implementing that again and letting players come straight out of high school. Uh, but yeah, that was part of an NBA collective bargaining agreement that
What do you think?
occurred, and that's
I may cut you off. What do you think about that? Do you think that they should get rid of that and just let people
well
come
when
straight out
you
of high school?
the thing is, when you look at the numbers, like that, average NBA player's career coming out of high school is like I think it was like 28 players that came straight out of high school to play in the NBA from when the NBA started up until 2019 through the 2019 season, and like the average for a drafted player, their career is like 11 years, which is like almost twice the length of the average year for like a Division I player, which is like I want to say from like court one, which is the top court, I think their average career is like maybe 6 years or like a hair under five. So it's almost like twice as long. And then even like undrafted high school players have really long careers too. So they've been when they were allowed, they were like super productive in the NBA and stuck around for a very long time. So I don't I don't really know what message the NBA was trying to send by not letting high schoolers come straight out of high school. I think that they should allow it. I mean, because I don't, any kid who's going to come straight out of high school is good enough. They're just going to go to a college and play for 1 year and then come out anyway. So I don't see what the
Yeah.
big deal is. Like, why do they need to just play 1 year of college or just sit out for a year or go play? You had a couple of players like Brandon Jennings and who played overseas for a year. You might have heard of LeVar Ball's LaMelo Ball. He played overseas for a year before being drafted. I believe he was selected number 2 or number 3. Like, yeah, they should just be allowed right out of high school. It's not that many. It's not that many players that make it straight out of high school. I don't see why they put that rule in place. Honestly,
Yeah. So, like, towards the end of the book, you talked about something, I think you called it the 13th year, which is
the
like
13th grade.
alternatives. Yeah, 13th
Yeah,
grade, where
yeah.
you talk about alternatives to going to school. Um, what are the advantages of that?
So there are several advantages, right? So first and foremost, okay, you got to think about it. If you're coming out of school, out of high school, and you already have a name for yourself, and you're like pretty solidified. The good thing about kind of going the alternative path is that like you can kind of like protect your draft equity. So what I mean by that is like instead of going to play for like Kansas, where you're going to be playing against like playing in this great division against like some of the best players in college basketball, you go and play for like you could sit out. There's been actually some players like Anthony Simmons with the Portland Trailblazers, um, Kenya Martin Jr. Same way. A lot of these players, they either sit out and take like a gap year after their senior year, because once again, you just have to be 19, at least 19 years old, and 1 year removed from your high school graduation to be eligible for the NBA draft. So several players took a gap year and just like practiced by themselves, and then were drafted the next year. So I'll speak on that first. So you're not going to be able to increase your draft stock if you do that, if you just kind of take a gap year. But in the same way, you're not going to probably fall off much. So it's almost like you're freezing yourself in time to where your stock is at.
Mm.
So you're probably still going to get drafted, and you're not going to get like potentially exposed by better Division I players. And on top of that, you don't have to take college classes or nothing, and you don't have to follow like NCAA guidelines that have like how they have rules and regulations for how long practice can be held a day. So you could like literally be in the gym for 10 hours a day in a gap year every single day working on your game before you make it to the NBA. And then
That
same
makes
thing with
sense.
some of these other same thing with these other organizations like Overtime Elite, which is kind of like a new. I call it like I call it that alternative select prep. Uh, you have teams like Overtime Elite where it's like they function like a forget the name of it, but they function like a school that travels like a Oak Hill Academy and like a Mount Verde Academy. They function like a prep school, right? Like a national prep school. But since it's not a prep school, they can kind of like they can practice longer. It's a massive gray area, but essentially you can like play, you can practice way more than a player that's like on a Division I team. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe NCAA has rules where it's like you can't conduct practice for more than like 3 or 3.5 hours a day. You can't have a practice for 7 hours. Like you can't do that. But if you're taking a gap year, or you're playing for an alternative select prep school, you can.
Huh. So
Yeah.
far, have there been any players that came out of this overtime elite league?
Yes, there's been several. Actually, and the numbers have been growing. So that league just started up in, I think 2020 was the first year of 2021. They've already had like, I think like 8 or 9 NBA draft pick selections, and like half of those were like top 5 NBA picks. So
Hmm.
there's been like top talents that's been coming out of this league already.
All right, that's
And
pretty
it's only
cool.
been like 3 drafts so far. Yeah.
All right, what about G League? Has that been
Mhm.
successful in producing a lot of NBA talent?
As far as producing NBA talent, it definitely has been successful. The league has, so back when it was the D League, it had a lot fewer teams. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head. I do know I looked at their website recently. There's like, it looks like they've at least doubled or tripled the amount of teams they have since I tried out for them for the national tryout back in 2010. But it's there's players definitely making it. I'm not going to say like superstars are coming out of the G League, because you got to think about it. The G League is essentially the minor league of the NBA. If the players were good enough, they were really good. They're never going to see a day in the G League. Uh, but it's definitely growing. It's definitely serving the purpose that the NBA is looking for. It's definitely serving the purpose.
Awesome. So, as you've said in your book, and as we've talked about so far, it seems to be a really intense competition to get to the NBA because there's only so many spots. And what my
Yes.
question is, what kind of emotional and mental toll does this take on these young athletes trying to get to the league?
I don't think it takes much of a mental toll, because I think that there are a lot of these. I think that the majority of these players, especially the Division I players, they're not even aware of. They're not aware of the chances. They just think like, hey, I'm on the Division I team. As long as I go out here and ball out and average 15 points a game, a year I got a chance of making it. I think they're totally just not aware. So I don't think it's having any toll on them at all, because once again, like I said, that study I came across, 75% of Division I players think they got a chance of making it. So that means guys that aren't even starters, that's coming off the bench, think that they got a chance of making it.
Yeah.
And it's just
Is
so
it
I don't even think, yeah, I don't think they're being affected mentally or emotionally.
when it comes to that 75%, is it just like, how they say you have to fake it till you make it? You know, is it
I
that or
don't
is it just
I
delusion?
think I think I'm not, delusions kind of sounds a little strong, but I just think they're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
aware.
yeah,
You know how they say, like, you ever heard the saying awareness is the best defense?
yeah.
I don't. They're literally not aware. Like Isaac, I wasn't aware of it back when I was playing ball, and I mean, I was all about this life at one time. I wasn't aware of it, so I know if I wasn't aware of it, and I never, I did play against several Division I players while I was playing with University of Cincinnati during the Devereaux League, and I had a chance to play against, a few Division I players, but I never suited it up. So I can only imagine, and it's not like these coaches are telling these kids or young men, it's not like they're telling them like, hey, you guys are going to maybe you need to think about a plan B. They're doing their job as a coach. So they're,
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but are you looking to reach a dynamic and engaged audience of curious minds? Well, look no further. Bright Brains Podcast is the perfect platform to showcase your business or product. You'll be able to reach a diverse and intelligent audience and engage with listeners passionate about personal development, technology, and more. Elevate your brand through thought-provoking discussions. Don't miss this opportunity to promote your business on one of the fastest growing podcasts in the market. Contact us today to discuss advertising options and elevate your brand to the next level. Contact us at brightbrainspod@gmail.com to secure your advertising spot on Bright Brains today. Again, that's Bright Brains with a Z, pod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Now, back to the podcast.
It got kind of choppy for a second there. I think maybe the NBA or something is listening in and they don't want us talking all these facts. They kind of ruined the stream for a bit. But I think I kind of got the gist of what you were saying. But basically, I want to say this. I know earlier I talked to you. I said, like, what advice would you give? Let's say there's a young man in high school, right? And he's not really getting any of the publicity. What kind of things should these young athletes focus on before they if they're really serious about making the NBA? Should they just train harder? Should they maybe look into going to a different school? Like, if you were advising somebody, like, what would you tell them to do? Like, if they were dead serious on getting to the NBA?
That is a tough question. So first and foremost, obviously, I would hit them with the facts. I would show them all the statistics and the chances. Then from there, they're like, okay, I get it. I still want to just give this my absolute all. The biggest thing I wish I would have took a little bit more seriously, I would say, like, you guys just be in that gym and you conditioning, being in that weight room, getting in shape, and just you want to eat, sleep, breathe in that gym. Practice is over. You should be in the gym. If you can't be in the gym at where your school is at, you need to go to like a YMCA gym or something. Like, you got to live in the gym. It's just so hard, knowing what I know, to like be able to look a kid in the face that doesn't already have like publicity already nationwide by the time they're a high schooler, and be like, yeah, you can make it if like, I think that's kind of like the wise tale, right? Like, just like, oh, hard work pays off, just keep working hard, and it'll happen. But like I said, man, the numbers are the numbers. It's the end of my book talks about it. I mean, it gets to the parts where you look at, like, chances of making it from being a Division III player drafted into the NBA, 0.0000, 1 in a million chances, literally. So you're literally looking at, like, it's just not that many spots, right? You got, 30-something NBA teams. They carry 15 players. Some teams now carry 17 players. That 2 of them are designated for the G League for most of the season. So at the most, we're looking at about 600 spots in the NBA, right? 1/5 of those spots, like we talked about earlier, goes to people who are foreign-born, who are born outside of the United States. So boom, there goes 20% of those 600 spots. And then also, you got to think about people who are in the NBA right now. So LeBron James been in the NBA for like 21 years, right? So that one spot, that quote-unquote spot, has been not available for 21 years because LeBron James got that spot. Steph Curry been in the league for however long he's been in that. So when you look at it year to year, there's just not that many spots. And then if you are, let's say you do make it, right? You're lucky enough to make it. You're skilled enough to make it. Across the board, about 2 out of every 5 players that make the NBA, their career is going to last 5 years or less across the board. So when you look at all of this, and I believe about 20% is just 1 or 2 years. So it's like 1 out of 5, you get drafted, boom, you're going to be gone. Oh, and if you're drafted, the last 2 decades have shown us that about 10 to 12% of players, they get drafted, never play. So, boom, there goes some other people that's not going to play. Like, usually, when this book just showed me, just from so many different levels, it just really shows the exclusivity of making it. And I just think people are just totally disconnected, right? Like you wouldn't just see like a 350-pound guy, a 350-pound, like 6'1" guy walking down the street and think like, oh, that guy's supposed to be a linebacker in the NFL, or let alone
Uh-huh.
approach him and be like, so why aren't you a linebacker in the NFL? Like, I think a lot of people think you're like kind of crazy if you did that. So it's this
Yeah.
weird inclination, and I can speak for myself, being a tall person, being 6'6". People literally just approach you and be like, I know you play basketball. What team you play? You know, granted, okay, there is some truth to stereotypes. So a lot of tall people probably, a lot of them probably did play ball back in the day. But I just want people to realize it's the majority of tall people aren't going to make it. And I'll even give you guys this. I'll drop this knowledge on you, right? So when you look at any American male that's 6'6", 6'7", or 6'8", I believe it's something like 0.07% of them will play in the NBA one day.
Wait, say that again.
0.07% of American males that are 6'6", 6'7", or 6'8" will play in the NBA.
Ooh.
0.07%. Do you want to know how many? Now 7-footers, right? Everybody would think like, oh, it's 7-footer. You would just have to suck so bad not to make it. You want to know what percentage of 7-footers in America make the NBA?
What is it?
17%.
Whoa.
Less
Uh,
than 1 in 5 7-footers will play in the NBA.
so less than five people in America who are 7 feet tall will play in the NBA.
Less than 1 in 5. Yeah,
Less than
17%
one in
of
five.
seven. Yep, 17% of 7-foot Americans will play in the NBA, which means that 83% of American 7-footers will never play in the NBA, and nobody would know that. I certainly didn't know that before I did the research, and I certainly didn't know it was that low for even people that are like 6'6", 6'7", or 6'8". But yeah, 0.07%. It's just when you hear these numbers, right? If somebody's a gambling person, right? If you heard like, hey, the odds of winning on this is 0.07%, you'd probably be like, there's no chance, right? That's what you would think, like, oh, no chance. 17% doesn't sound too good either, right? You know, like, oh, you got like a 1 in 5 chance. I don't like those odds.
Yeah. Especially because there's always going to be somebody who works harder than you and who's better than you, you know? Um,
Yep.
my question is this. You said before you wrote this book, you tried to find this book and you couldn't find it, so
Uh,
that's why you wrote it. Why do you think it is
yes.
like nobody has ever touched this subject before?
Hmm. I would think because after doing all the research, they probably didn't want to have to go through all the numbers, man. I mean, I spent so much time writing this book; it's ridiculous. But honestly, I that is a good question, man. Because like I said, I thought something like this would have definitely been written by now. That's why I looked for a book, you know, when I was
Yeah.
trying to find the numbers. But you got me stumped on that one. The biggest thing I can say is like maybe you know, there's tons of books about like, oh, why college players should be compensated, which obviously now they can be through NIL deals, which just came through a few years ago. But there's a ton of books about that. There's a ton of books about like stories of college basketball coaches out there. But yeah, I'm really shocked that there wasn't a book like this ever written. The only thing I could think of is like it just takes so much time because it was like a level of research that just it almost felt I felt like I wrote a dissertation essentially. Like this felt like a dissertation when I wrote it, as far as like the amount of data and how much time I put into it. Because like I said, I plan on spending 2 years on this was my initial goal going in. It took 4 years.
Yeah. When you tell people about this book, what are their responses? Like when you tell them about this book and your data, is it like, do you get a lot of pushback? Is it like, are they receptive?
I think I think it goes through one year and out the other, man, which has been the crazy part. You know, it's like I feel like people are just so stuck in like the perception of things. But you know, it's just like you know when Galileo was telling people the world wasn't flat and that it was round. You know, people thought he was insane. They thought he was crazy. You know, anytime you're going against the grain, you're naturally not going to be accepted at first. That's just how, when you look at society, right? When you look at, we were in horse and buggies, and then when we had the first automobiles, it wasn't like everybody overnight was like, oh, get rid of the horse and buggy, we're gonna go straight to automobile. They didn't trust automobiles. It was like, that's a machine. What if it explodes? What if I don't trust that thing? Hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Yeah.
When credit cards first came out, you think everybody just like switched over to credit cards? They're like, how is this piece of plastic supposed to represent money? This is a scam. What did people say about Bitcoin when it first came out? That's a scam. You see, history repeats itself. So I feel like people have met it with resistance. I feel like people don't believe it. I feel like people think it's a stretch. I feel like people think it's sensationalized. It is 100% factual. Uh, I put no opinion into this book. The book is just the numbers the way they came out. I put the numbers in, and then whatever the numbers got spit out, that's just what I represent in the book. But so far, it's been like not accepted. It's been very, very like just like I talk to people about it, and it's just kind of like, oh wow, okay, that sounds interesting, But I still feel like people, even like our conversation right now, I still feel like it's gonna just be people out there that's just like, if you're good enough, you'll still make it though. If you're like 6'4" taller and you're good enough, you're gonna get a chance. I just feel that I know that that's gonna be the conception, but it still be the common thought. But I think over time, maybe a few years from now, we're gonna come out with additional additions to this book every 5 years. The next book actually will be coming out. The next version will be coming out in 2026, and then it'll be in a 5-year increments from there. But I believe it will catch on. As like anything else, it takes time. I'm gonna keep fighting the fight and getting the message out there. I just want people to be aware. And the big thing is that once again, and I'll kind of touch on this a little bit too. With the book here, right? It's a whole program. So I want to work with different schools and colleges, and what we're gonna do is after I talk with them and talk with the team and give them a 3 hour kind of back and forth speech about based on the book, the history of basketball, going through all these statistics and things of that nature. Uh, I'm gonna actually work with different corporations across the country and eventually across the world, but starting off in the U.S. I want to do partnerships with different major corporations to where these college basketball players who don't make it professionally in NBA or any other league that excel in the classroom, want to help them get into leadership positions right out the gate. So that's something that we're working on for phase 2 of this. The book is phase 1 of I call it of the business. That's the phase 1, the book and doing in-person speeches. Phase 2 is actually working with corporations to set up like a job funnel for these kids who perform really great in the classroom, and going into the corporate world for these young men. So this is we're in it for the long run.
I'm curious. Do you know the statistics on how many of these student athletes who don't go to the NBA, how many of them actually graduate from college?
I do not know that exact number. One thing that I do know though is that I can say is that a lot of these schools, they'll tout about how like they'll be like, oh, we had a 3.4 overall GPA for our men's baseball team. Anybody that's in the know knows, I forget the exact terminology for it, but there's a lot of classes that they set up in colleges where they basically just like pass them with an A and there's like basically no work.
Yeah.
Just so they can, especially at the Division I, at the major Division Is, it's a whole little kind of like it's its own little society. But I don't want to get too into that. But I don't know the exact GPAs, but a lot of these players that come out, they did not get a great education because they were focusing on basketball. So it's a weird like double-edged sword, right? Because it's like if you want to be a NBA player one day, you got to put your all into it. But almost everybody's not going to make it. And if you don't have a plan B, then you don't have nothing to fall back on. It's like one of the only skill sets where it's like if you don't make it, it's like a gamble almost. Because it's like a huge gamble. If you don't make it, it's hard to fall back on something else if you didn't get your education. Like if you're a great lawyer, you're gonna get like work somewhere. If you know how to code really good, you're gonna make money off of coding somewhere. If you're a great basketball player, but you're not great enough to play professionally anywhere, you're probably not gonna make a penny off of it. But you spent all of this time, all of these years, your whole life playing it. So it's a really tricky area, and I just think there's a lot of justice that needs to be done, a lot of shifting of there needs to be a lot of paradigm shifts just in general around just the college level of athletics. Like I said,
Yeah,
it's one thing to dream, but it's another thing in reality. Once again.
yeah. The reason I asked that question is because my hope with this book is that, there are a lot of talented athletes out there, who are
Mhm.
going to Division II schools and Division III schools. And my hope is
Yes.
that what people can read this book and realize that, hey, I'm not going to go to the NBA, but I am in college and I can
Yeah.
use this free education that I'm getting, if they're on scholarship, there are a lot of men who are on
Yeah.
basketball scholarships.
Yeah, Division III players don't get athletic scholarships. So there's no
That's
athletic
right. Yeah.
scholarships at Division III level. But sorry, I just had to throw that
Nah,
in
you're
there.
cool. I'm
Go
glad you
ahead.
said that.
Yeah,
But still, like Division
yeah,
One and Two, like if you're in
yeah,
those schools, you might not go to
uh,
the NBA, but use that opportunity to get an education. I feel
yes,
like a lot of these men, and I don't know the statistics, and I'm not sure if you do either, but
mhm,
a lot of these men, they go to these schools and they don't go to the NBA, and then they don't get an education, and it just feels like a waste.
yeah,
My hope with this book is that like it'll inspire people to say, "Hey, I'm not going to be the next LeBron, but I
mhm,
can be the next CEO of this company. I can be the next
exactly.
doctor or lawyer or teacher or businessman."
Mhm,
Um,
yeah,
we can use this athletic ability to open up doors that don't necessarily mean NBA. And I think, I asked
yes,
uh, what the reception of this book is and why it hasn't been written before. I think that a lot of people, especially people who come from poor backgrounds, you know,
mhm,
they dream about getting to the NBA and getting that money, and if you come from a
mhm,
poor background, a lot of times your schooling isn't the greatest. And
true.
these kids, they go to these colleges and the NCAA makes billions.
Tons,
Yeah,
tons,
yeah.
and they
And
make nothing. They get a
exactly,
scholarship, but they make no actual money in pocket payments. Yeah,
exactly.
it's
And
capitalism at its finest, my friend.
yeah, the conspiracy theorist in me says that the reason why they came up with that rule about having to be removed for 1 year after the
Mhm.
age of 19 is because they want the colleges to get that money from all these young men. I mean, is that crazy or
No, dude, I didn't want to say that, but I
I
think that has a lot to do with it. I didn't want to say it, but
I
yes,
feel you.
I
I
think
feel
that's
you.
part of it.
I won't touch it anymore.
I didn't. I,
Let's see. Let me ask you this: can you describe some
uh,
of like any personal stories or stories you read about other athletes or individuals who are striving or to make it to the NBA that you have found particularly impactful?
so I'm myself, even though I wrote this book, I'm a little bit kind of out of the loop with the whole kind of with basketball right now, as far as the day-to-day operations. To be honest, uh,
Mhm.
you know, I know I have the pedigree to have written this book, and at one time I was deep into the basketball world, but I really don't, I don't really know, any standouts right now who are playing at the college level that's hey, we need to use this platform to to raise awareness for this, or to let's take our schooling more serious. It just seems like it's just another old same old day, and then with social media, it's kind of just now everybody's kind of promoting themselves on a lot of narcissism, but
Yeah, yeah,
I just think dude, I just think it's just the same old stuff another day. I think it's the same thing. I think nothing has changed. I think it's the same pipe dream. I don't think nothing's changed. I don't see any players hey, I know I'm a college basketball player, but I'm striving for this, this, and this. It just all seems like it's kind of like the whole status quo. I'm not seeing nothing yet, but hopefully I can help to do a little bit to change that situation. That's my goal.
What do you think will happen if like an NBA player like LeBron James or Steph Curry came out and said, "Hey kids, you're not going to make it to the NBA. Try and do something else." What do you think would happen? Would there be like backlash or?
I mean, they can't say that because it's a conflict of interest, right? You got to keep the dream alive, right? It's in the American spirit to keep the quote unquote dream alive, right? So hypothetically, if they were to say that, it would it would cannibalize the game. You would essentially like be cannibalizing basketball. So they would never say that. If anything, they're gonna say like, oh, it's just like remember Michael Jordan, the commercials. I want to be like Mike. They're gonna, if anything, they're gonna use their likeness to make more money and to sell the dream. It just is what it is. You're never gonna you're not going to have some high profile athlete, I don't think, that's going to come out the woodworks and just randomly say, like, hey, kids, I know you want to be just like me, but you're never going to be me. They're going to, they might say it in a certain way, a little bit different way, but they're going to always be, I just like they're going to always be selling that dream because they got to sell shoes. They're trying to sell their, these basketball players, they got shoe contracts. They're selling a dream by selling those shoes, right? It's like if you buy LeBron James shoes, you know what I'm saying? You could play like LeBron. You could be like LeBron, so. They would be basically, if they were to make a statement like that, it would be like totally not in their interest and it would actually hurt their bottom line, personally and from an organizational standpoint. So they have to feed the beast and give into it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So how can your book contribute to a broader conversation about the dreams, challenges, and realities of young men aspiring to play in the NBA?
You're not going to make it. No. Okay, it's a very strong chance you're not going to make it. But I do want to say this, though, and being 100% serious. Always chase your dreams, right? We wouldn't have, Jeff Bezos wouldn't have, like, chased his dream. We wouldn't have Amazon, like, I believe it's the largest or the biggest growing company on the planet or whatever. But, like, Elon Musk, so on and so forth. You got to dream. You have to dream. Everybody needs to dream. It's healthy to dream. But along with that dreaming, you also need to be aware of reality. I think a lot of people lose track of reality and they just get like too stuck in the dream. Chase your dreams, you know what I'm saying? Somebody's got to make it, but you got to realize it's a very bad gamble. The numbers speak for themselves. This isn't me saying it. I can just put the numbers in front of anybody. The numbers speak for themselves. If somebody takes the time to read through this book, cover to cover, they're going to learn so much information. I wish, going back in time, 17-year-old me, if somebody else would have wrote the same exact book, and if I would have read it cover to cover, front to back, when I was 17, it would have totally changed the path I would have went thinking about basketball. And that's just being blatantly honest. That's just being all the way honest. It would have totally changed my entire thought process. I would have probably gone a different path. If I would have made a Division I right out of high school like I did, I probably would have never even pursued basketball anymore at that point, knowing what I know now. But I was told to dream just like everybody else. So somebody has to step up. Once again, I'm not trying to be the doom and gloom guy. I'm just the factual guy. I'm just, how like Kawhi Leonard, they see he's the fun guy, right? Like this is Kawhi Leonard. Some people get those over like, I'm just the fact guy. I'm the fact guy. I just bring the facts. You know what I'm saying? Hashtag facts, man. I just bring those facts all day, every day. So, it's like they always say, man, don't kill the messenger, right? Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just the messenger with the numbers. This isn't me like trying to say like this isn't me coming down on college basketball or coming down on the NBA. I love college basketball. I love watching the NBA. Once again, chase your dreams, but the numbers are the numbers. It's the truth, and you need to at least be aware. If I could speak to any basketball player out there, seriously, is thinking about trying to make the NBA one day as a college player right now or high school player. Read the book, or and even a coach, so that you can talk to your players, or have me come in and talk with your players about these things. Read the book cover to cover. be aware. Be aware of the situation. By being aware of the numbers, it should make you like we were saying earlier, you should be eat, sleeping, and breathing, working out, and then being in the gym. You shouldn't be doing nothing else. You should have no friends pretty much besides other basketball players if you're seriously trying to make it. It has to be that serious. These are, to even have the slightest chance among chances, you got to basically like cut everything else out. You got to cut everything out. You can't be screwing around with girls or guys if that's what people are, if you're into that. You can't be going out partying every night or going out and partying. You got to be a complete, like, you got to be consumed by it. You got to be like a man possessed by it.
Yeah.
As they say, you have to have a basketball Jones, as they say. But it's just,
Even
with all
being,
that, though, the numbers speak for themselves. Yep.
yeah. I was just gonna say, even if you do all that, chances are you might not make it. You know,
Chances are, it's not even might. It's not might.
you won't.
Chances are you're basically guaranteed not to make it.
Yeah,
Basically,
guaranteed not to.
yeah.
Yeah. So where can people go to find out, to buy your book and also to get more information about you?
So for more information about me, you can look up Rod to Infinity on all social media. If I'm not there under Rod to Infinity, that's ROD, the number two Infinity, all one word. If I don't show up, it's because I'm not on that particular platform. So I know I'm most active on LinkedIn and Twitter right now. We're going to start getting more of a YouTube presence here in the future. Also, Instagram, we're going to start being on there a little bit more. Um, and you can buy the book on Amazon right now. Also, you can go on my website, airballthebook.com, to buy the book in for more information about booking an in-person appointment, and anything else about me is also on the website. So airballthebook.com is the website. Once again, Rod to Infinity is my social media handle.
Awesome. Well, I know my listeners are going to check out that book and they're going to go to that website and learn more because this has been a very informative discussion. I learned a lot today,
For
and I know
sure.
my listeners did too. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate this. And
Hey,
you
thanks for
have a
letting me
good
come on
day.
Bright Brains. Thanks for letting me come on Bright Brains, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey,
Take
no
care.
problem.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us for another enlightening conversation here on Bright Brains. I hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your own bright ideas. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform or however else you listen to this podcast. Also, we can be found on all major social media. Just type in Bright Brains with a Z. And remember, the brightest minds are those that never stop seeking knowledge.